House of the Dragon centers on a power struggle for the Iron Throne. King Viserys chooses a female heir, breaking a century of tradition. The realm disputes the choice, questioning whether a woman can sit on the Iron Throne as ruling queen, something never attempted before in the history of Westeros. This succession diverges from anything seen before. One faction argues that a certain heir was never suited to wear the crown, while others insist the other was meant for it. House of the Dragon ultimately falls only from within. As with any great tale from this fictional world, the story concerns a power struggle for the throne, though the unique element here is that instead of one family fighting another, the Targaryens turn on themselves. 170 years in the past, at the height of the Targaryen Empire, King Viserys loses a wife along with the attempt to produce a male heir, and his daughter, Rhaenyra, becomes heir to the throne. The show spans many years as children are born, grow up, become young people, and have children of their own, resulting in a significant number of time jumps throughout the story. Ultimately, the narrative remains the story of one family, built around 4 or 5 main characters who anchor the focus. The culture on display portrays a society closer to gods than to men, a decadent, wealthier time following 60 years of peace. It offers a glimpse of the realm before the descent into the detritus and post-decadence of war seen in the original series. An air of exclusivity emerges from keeping to a closed circle, though one theme of the story suggests that such isolation carries long-term risk. A complaint surfaces that, despite a decade on the throne, the position of Hand has never been offered, prompting the question of why it should be. The response maintains that kinship alone should be reason enough, since the blood of the dragon runs thick. Viserys, the elder, and Daemon, the younger, grow up together with an evidently close relationship, shaped by a rather difficult father. Viserys I, the king, is the heir chosen by the Great Council, taking over when Jaehaerys passes away and now reigning over the 7 kingdoms. A wish exists for everyone nearby to be kind to each other and enjoy a nice time, a wish that continually goes unmet. Viserys has always looked after Daemon, treating him more as a wayward child than as a brother. A lifetime of defending Daemon meets the accusation that his heart runs even blacker than expected. Daemon emerges as arguably the most fascinating character in the tale, mercurial and unpredictable, with that unpredictability surfacing as restlessness and, at times, violence. A warning cautions that, beginning that night, King's Landing will learn to fear the color gold. Daemon shares a very close relationship with his niece Rhaenyra, and the adoration runs both ways. A shared claim to ancestry links the two. Rhaenyra Targaryen, the eldest living child of King Viserys Targaryen I, starts out more a rebel without a cause she finds later in the season. As a dragon rider, Rhaenyra holds the position of princess. Asked whether the position causes worry, she replies that the position suits her well and feels quite comfortable. Alicent Hightower, daughter of Otto Hightower, the Hand of the King, is a pretty young girl, vivacious and very bright, who believes in the old order that men lead society and remains completely fine with that. She claims contentment as a spectator, though a slow realization follows that every man she encounters ends up a disappointment. Alicent and Rhaenyra grow up together, forming the kind of deep, special bond only teenage girls can share, though the forces of patriarchy eventually conspire to drive the two apart. Dragons symbolize a number of things. The Targaryens rank closer to gods largely because of the dragons, which serve as weapons of mass destruction. Dragons prove truly formidable, capable of turning the tide of a battle, and the fear surrounding them helps keep Targaryen power secure. An arrival seeks the egg, and the egg changes hands. Extensive work goes into creating dragon infrastructure. A dragon pit houses dragons, with dragon keepers assigned to tend to them. This era features entire jobs and professions built around the care and feeding of dragons, a detail that dramatizes how dragons figure into day-to-day life in this world. There is a genuine hope that audiences remain open to watching a new chapter in the Game of Thrones saga, one that will feel both familiar and different, cast in the end as the ride everyone wants to take. Dragons will rule the 7 kingdoms for the next 100 years just as they did the last. The best fiction and the best drama center on characters, and House of the Dragon offers a tale about deeply flawed human beings, capable of doing good things, capable of doing monstrous things, capable of courage, and capable of cowardice. Such characters count among the most compelling kind. Game of Thrones begins roughly in the year 298 AC, almost 300 years after Aegon's conquest, while House of the Dragon unfolds a couple of hundred years earlier, before the events of Game of Thrones. Jaehaerys Targaryen, known as the Old King, was the 4th Targaryen to rule over Westeros. He ascended to the Iron Throne at only 14 years old and ruled for 55 years, a peaceful and prosperous era during which King's Landing grew enormously, remembered simply as a good time. Viserys I, chosen as heir by the Great Council, took over the throne when Jaehaerys passed away and began reigning over the Seven Kingdoms. By that point, many Targaryens existed, and the seeds of war took root even in times of peace, as fathers died and their sons took over without feeling bound by the old allegiances, decisions, or vows, allowing those seeds to spread little by little. Where Game of Thrones centered on the Starks and the Lannisters, House of the Dragon places the Targaryens themselves at its core, with the Velaryons and the Hightowers standing out as two of the biggest players in the Dance of Dragons civil war. The Hightowers rank as the oldest house in the history of Westeros, present for thousands of years. Their seat of power, Old Town, was for thousands of years the largest city in Westeros and a very rich house, its wealth built mainly on trade. At its center stands the High Tower, the tower from which the family takes its name. Lord Hightower rules his domains from Old Town, while his younger brother Otto Hightower serves as Hand of the King when the story begins, the same position Ned Stark once held to Robert at the start of Game of Thrones. The Velaryons also originated from the freehold of Valyria, the mightiest empire of the West, and actually arrived in Westeros before the Targaryens. Unlike the Targaryens, they were not dragon lords but seafarers, and at the time, Valyria depended heavily on trade, giving them a strong position to dominate commerce from the kingdoms of Westeros and lands even farther north. Reasons of trade and wealth drove the move itself. Corlys Velaryon holds the titles of Lord Admiral and Master of Ships, just as his own grandfather of a similar name did before him. Since Aegon's conquest, the Velaryons have held a prominent place in the councils of House Targaryen, and after many voyages, a marriage joined the family to Rhaenys Targaryen, known as the Queen Who Never Was, reflecting a close and definitive relationship between House Targaryen and House Velaryon. The Targaryens count as likewise an ancient house, though not an ancient Westerosi one. Anticipating the destruction coming to Valyria, they fled far from the capital and settled on the volcanic island of Dragonstone, having been dragon lords back in Valyria. Dragons proved truly formidable, capable of turning the tide of a battle, flying, difficult to hit, and breathing fire against which most knights and men-at-arms have little or no protection. This is where the comparison to a nuclear option arises, since possessing dragons makes a house hard to challenge. Fear of dragons ranks as one of the key factors that kept the Targaryens secure in their power. A dragon's saddle is one thing, but the Iron Throne is the most dangerous seat in the realm. Dragons wield a power that should never have been trifled with, one that brought Valyria its doom. History warns that failing to heed its lessons will bring the same fate. Fascination surrounds returning to a time of high decadence, peace, and prosperity, and with seeing the Targaryens at their height. The height of an empire usually marks the peak of its technology, and the production wanted to convey this opulent and decadent society. The intent was to let viewers see what the realm looked like before it descended into the ruin and post-decadence of war depicted in the original series. An immersive environment was built for both cast and crew, meant to draw everyone further into the world under construction. The Red Keep composite counts as the jewel of the whole production, since much of the season's action takes place there. A large staircase was introduced as a symbol of power, evoking a sense of parliament, as well as the family's home. The composite also allows many vantage points for observing the small pockets of conversation taking place, adding to the intrigue and conspiracy assumed to be constant in such settings. Everything is built in rather than spread across separate stages, a setup that proved fun to work with and incredible. Amazement greets the fact of never having worked on a set like the Red Keep before. Part of the discussion around the Red Keep and other familiar locations centered on needing to shoot in every direction without resorting to visual effects, something achievable on that particular set. The story unfolds 200 years before the events of the original series, so Valyrian architecture took on a brutalist quality tied to the Targaryens, an influence later carried through to King's Landing, though not strongly represented in the original show. Some assets from the earlier production were reused, though the set decorating and design team wanted a fresh look. The result reads as relatable to the original series while retaining its own identity, with unused archival material repurposed into something new. In terms of set decorating and creating what feels almost like a new world while carrying certain elements of the earlier series through it, an opportunity open to experiment and develop new ideas, a genuinely exciting process. All the scale admired in the original series returns here as well. A dragon's saddle is one thing, but the Iron Throne earns the title of the most dangerous seat in the realm. The throne stands as a major focus, having been iconic in the original series. The aim was to honor that legacy while also improving on it, with close involvement from the creative leads from day one. Imagining how the throne might have changed over time in Westeros held real fascination, along with telling the story of its evolution into the form seen in the original series. The design aimed to reflect the power of the Targaryen dynasty, with every element of the throne representing a fallen warrior. The operatic quality of the story demanded reconfiguring the throne room, and as a result, the throne spread out and grew into a carpet of swords. One of the many beautiful things about the original creation of Westeros lies in how truly immersive a world it is, and excitement builds around everyone getting to see it. A king names an heir to the Iron Throne. The Targaryens count as a fascinating dynasty about which little is known from the original books, since by the time of the main story they have all died out. The idea of a civil war among them, called the Dance of Dragons, grew out of collaborative work on the project, generating excitement among those involved. As with any great tale from this fictional world, the story centers on a power struggle for the throne. What makes it unique is that instead of one family fighting another, as with the Lannisters and the Starks, this conflict pits the Targaryens against themselves. The setting sits 200 years before later events, at the height of the Targaryen Empire, a time of decadence marked by advanced technology and considerable hubris. The production emphasized portraying an opulent and decadent society, one that had known no war for 60 years and lived contentedly. Anyone who challenged the Targaryens understood they would face their dragons, so no one dared attempt to overthrow them. A lord swears fealty, promising loyalty to the king. Considerable effort went into assembling the cast, with very specific qualities sought in each performer, and the first person wanted for a role was a particular actor. A struggle with the burdens of kingship surfaces, along with a felt duty to preserve peace among the kingdoms. Sitting on the Iron Throne counts as an extremely difficult position, one whose occupant must be fully aware of its dangers, whether king or queen. An heir emerges as strong-minded and smart, though often underestimated. Women within the kingdom spend their lives in service to men, a dynamic she questions and resists rather than accepts. A brief exchange between two brothers follows. A deep affiliation, love, and admiration for a brother, the king, comes through alongside a character defined more by swords and knives than diplomacy. A drive to cause and thrive within chaos surfaces, alongside a clear, if unconventional, moral compass, one that draws firm lines between being in or out. The name King's Landing traces back to the site where a conqueror first landed his ships before beginning the conquest of Westeros. The Red Keep was built there, becoming the center of the city and the eventual seat of the Targaryens and the Iron Throne. The throne originally appears in the books as forged from thousands of swords. A hybrid design emerged, one closer to the original literary description while still honoring the version from the earlier television series. The throne makes a statement of power, built from the treasures of those conquered or killed. Walking into the throne room for the first time produced a striking moment of realization at actually sitting upon the Iron Throne. This period in Westeros stands as one of high decadence, peace, and prosperity, offering a glimpse of the realm before its descent into post-decadence and war depicted in the original series. A deep sense of loyalty and responsibility toward the original show comes through clearly. A strong desire to remain close to that earlier production reflects how the production stood as a game changer. George's writing counts as a huge influence, and achieving a dream job feels like an incredible thing. The long-awaited call arrives, the one every writer hopes for, announcing that the project will move forward. Happiness lasts only a few seconds before the weight of responsibility sets in. Excitement mixes with a touch of apprehension that always accompanies handing a creation over to foster parents. Continued involvement in the project persists despite the handover. Having Ryan on board counts as a positive, a great writer who truly understands the world of the story and intends to remain faithful to the source material. Miguel Sapochnik ranks as an amazing director, having won an Emmy and worked on some of the strongest episodes. A bit of suspense always lingers over how good the result will turn out, but confidence remains in being in good hands with Ryan and Miguel. Returning to Westeros counts as almost too great a challenge, one that must start with respect rather than change for its own sake. Both parties saw similar things, and the project avoided treatment as just a prequel for prequel's sake. An actual reason to tell the story existed. Interest stems from seeing the material through a different perspective. A line from the story asserts that men would sooner put the realm to the torch than allow a woman to ascend the Iron Throne. George's body of work forms a truly immersive world, containing unexplored, deep recesses and thousands of years of history. Reflection turns to what worked in the original series and what did not. along with questions about what could be improved and how the story should evolve. The sets, locations, and crews rank among the biggest ever encountered, staggering in scale. The creative vision emerged shared very similarly, with plans to begin in a more grounded, more intimate way before setting off together on a great adventure, marking a new chapter in the saga. An oath is sworn. Corlys Velaryon and Lord Hobart Hightower each pledged to remain faithful to King Viserys, swearing by the old gods and the new. Westeros functions as a feudal society, ruled by many noble houses, some dating back hundreds or even thousands of years. Two of the biggest players among these houses turn out to be the Velaryons and the Hightowers. The Hightowers hail from a very ancient, wealthy, and powerful household that has remained front and center in politics for hundreds of years. Their sigil bears a torch, and their motto declares that the way is lit, an ethos reflected in the characters of the Hightower family. Their seat of power sits on the southern coast at Oldtown, which for many thousands of years stood as the biggest city in Westeros. The faith was headquartered there as well, serving as the seat of the High Septon, the equivalent of the Pope. Within the series, both old gods and new gods find followers, with the Seven representing the newer religion. A strong connection binds the Hightowers and the High Septon. At the opening of the series, Otto Hightower holds the position of Hand of the King, a role tied closely to Hightower influence. A saying captures the burdens carried by the Hand, while the King enjoys the benefits of rule. The Hand steers the small council on the King's behalf when necessary, and ensures that the King's wishes are enforced. Otto serves as an advisor, though Viserys regards the role with suspicion. Otto sees danger in everything, with intentions considered good despite that wariness. A conviction holds that nothing but good intention lies behind such actions, alongside a remark suggesting no man has yet been made who has the patience for absolute power. The Velaryons carry Valyrian blood originating from the freehold of Valyria, once the mightiest empire in the west. As destruction, later called the Doom, approached Valyria, the Velaryons arrived in Westeros even before the Targaryens. High Tide stands as a standalone castle belonging to Lord Corlys, who holds the title of Master of Ships and ranks as the greatest sailor in the land, credited with completing 9 famous voyages. Under this leadership, the Velaryons control the greatest and strongest fleet. The Sea Snake plays the collector and trophy hunter, proud enough of these voyages to decorate a hall with objects won across the narrow sea and beyond. Aside from the throne, the Sea Snake counts as the richest person in Westeros. Still, wealth alone falls short, as a desire lingers for Velaryon blood to sit on the throne. His presence at the moment Viserys was chosen as king carries a lingering feeling that the position should have belonged to the wife instead, something never quite forgotten. A designation marks this figure as the queen who never was. Having a husband act as champion stands out, with a repeated refrain suggesting the position should have belonged to the wife and later to the daughter, an exchange that feels remarkable. This dynamic holds up as a classic example of a healthy, strong marriage, though the Velaryons overall felt displeased by the succession decision. With the realm aligned 20-1 against them, taking up arms to contest the decision seemed foolish. Jaehaerys wanted no bloodshed, seeking instead a smooth transition to the next successor. A closing reflection observes that history does not remember blood, it remembers names. When the news arrived that a new show was in development, set 200 years before Game of Thrones, strong interest surfaced. Learning of the role brought a rush of excitement, quickly followed by the realization of the scale of responsibility involved, since Game of Thrones carries an enormous history, fan base, and culture, making it the biggest television show and placing considerable pressure to live up to it. The central challenge lay in making something that resembled Thrones without simply repeating it, examining what worked, what did not, and how the established style could evolve. The project avoided conception as a prequel for its own sake, instead pursuing a story with genuine purpose, centered on the Targaryens, a dynasty barely explored in the original books because by that point in history they had already died out. Reference points to an earlier golden age when dozens of Targaryens and a host of dragons ruled over Westeros, a time of peace and prosperity when no one dared to challenge the family for fear of facing the dragons. This period stands remarkably decadent, offering a view of the realm before it collapses into ruin and post-decadence of war seen in the original series, with particular interest in returning to that height and in understanding what was later lost and pursued throughout the story. The original Game of Thrones weaves together many different threads as an epic, whereas this new story, while retaining similar scale and scope, focuses on a single family slowly tearing itself apart. A degree of wish fulfillment for audiences plays a part, with an intention to deliver what viewers want to see, just not in the manner expected, avoiding a rehash of the past in favor of something fresh and exciting. A strong wish to embrace the feel and world of Game of Thrones comes through, alongside room to expand and enhance it, while ensuring the audience still feels part of the same show. The first walk onto the set where King's Landing had been built left an impression that no one had informed the builders that constructing an entire castle was no longer standard filmmaking practice. Yet everything stood there, positioned exactly as it should be. Reading the script beforehand allows a scene to be imagined at home, but arriving on location always reveals something twice the size expected. With sets resembling ancient monuments, buildings crowned by massive statues, and locations so extraordinary they seem almost unbelievable to exist on Earth. The previous production sets and costumes already ranked as brilliant, so the aim here was not to outdo them, but simply to create something beautiful in its own right. An early decision held back the first season, starting in a more grounded and intimate way, though even with restraint applied, the scale remained large. Credit goes to the original creation of Westeros for feeling three-dimensional and fully realized, carrying thousands of years of history in which one can happily get lost. The best fiction and drama center on character, and this story frames itself as one about deeply flawed human beings capable of love and hate, and of both good and monstrous acts. Genuine hope holds that audiences remain open to a new chapter in the Game of Thrones saga, one recognized as its own cultural phenomenon, while this new story counts as something else entirely, told at scale but in a different way. All the size loved in the earlier show carries through, yet this new chapter roots itself in the domestic and the familial. A hope voices itself that fans will find everything they valued in Game of Thrones, including more dragons. Ryan Condal's connection to Game of Thrones traces back to 2001, when the first book in George R.R. Martin's saga was handed over and left a lasting impression, turning a casual reader into a devoted fan. Countless conversations centered on how to improve upon Thrones while evolving it, with an insistence that respect for the original had to come first, rather than change for its own sake. The original series earns deep love, though this new chapter charts its own journey and its own story, built to make the most of the experience. The show plays as a giant production that nonetheless stays grounded, dealing with love, relationships, child-rearing, loss, death, jealousy, and aspiration. It sums up as being about family and dragons, with the world's politics and intrigue cited as a major draw. A scene plays out in which a king faces challenge for never having offered the role of hand to a sibling, met with the reply that kinship alone does not justify such an appointment. A meeting with George R.R. Martin at a book signing, followed by an encounter in Santa Fe during the filming of a pilot for a fantasy western based on a comic book, marks the origin of a lasting friendship, sustained over the years through invitations to have a beer in Los Angeles. In the summer of 2018, a job offer followed, tied to a long-developed HBO project regarded as the most important one at hand. From there, an approach was made to Miguel Sapochnik, whose earlier work directing episodes of Game of Thrones had already established a reputation as a terrific director. His arrival as director and showrunner marks the point when the project truly began moving. A preference for staying close to the source material stands out, with the books providing seeds of ideas that are then expanded upon. A staged moment plays out with a crowd's laughter over who might inherit a title. Curiosity about the history of Westerosi civilization drives much of the appeal, likened to having a chance to talk to Tolkien. The source material earns praise as cinematic, character-driven, and very influential. A method of writing fantasy draws heavily from history and takes its best elements, then amplifies them further than reality, referencing a comedic comparison to turning things up past their normal limit. A confrontational line orders an opponent to face them, followed by a scream. Fiction, television, and film center fundamentally on emotion, needing to provoke feeling, tears, and laughter. Any failure to affect an audience emotionally counts as a failure of storytelling itself. Casting choices for the adult versions of two central characters stand as the early priority, with a phrase describing one of them as needing to be punk rock, said to have shaped the eventual direction taken with the performance. A long-held wish to work with one particular actress surfaces. A plea asks whether anyone in King's Landing will take one side over another. The search for a younger counterpart to an adult actress relied on childhood photographs that immediately suggested a match. A hope centers on a father wanting a son, the only thing he has ever wanted. A resemblance between two actresses stands out, though care was taken not to fixate on it, with energy cited as the deciding factor. A line follows, accusing someone of relentlessly advancing another as the heir. Two characters grow up together almost like sisters, extremely close until one is pushed into a role she never expected to fulfill. An intention to marry a particular lady gets declared. A struggle between mind and heart surfaces, with the heart insisting that losing a best and only friend would be the worst possible outcome, while duty ultimately wins out, with childbearing understood as its purpose. The sound of a crying infant follows. Childbearing parallels a battlefield for women in that era, with pregnancy itself carrying a risk of death, underscored by a scream. The role of women as both pawns and power players stands out, along with scenes depicting explicit discussion of feminism and self-perception among female characters. A line follows, warning that men would burn the realm before allowing a woman to take the Iron Throne, with a father's shrewdness on display. A cousin gets recalled as having been passed over in favor of a younger relative who became king. A reluctance to bear the responsibility of kingship surfaces, compounded by the loss of a wife while trying to produce a male heir, throwing everything into turmoil from the very start. The casting of this role settled almost immediately, met with agreement and laughter, and praised as a perfect fit for a character requiring vulnerability and a sense of being ill-suited to rule. Indecisiveness and a desire to avoid conflict lead to questionable decisions. A line follows, stating that one relative was never fit to wear the crown, contrasted with belief placed in another. The naming of an heir against convention signals recognition of real potential to rule, giving that heir a rare sense of finally being good enough for a father's approval, complicated by the awkwardness of simultaneously serving wine at the same event. A tension emerges in which apparent power is undercut by manipulation from men around the character, regardless of whether that manipulation is recognized. One character emerges as the most fascinating in the story, mercurial and unpredictable, with even personal desires unclear to the character. A tense exchange follows, contrasting one man's honor with another's failure to protect, met with a denial and a challenge asking protection from what, answered simply with, yourself. This character plays the disruptive brother, prone to ruining celebrations through drunkenness or violence, and embodying an unruly, distinctly Targaryen temperament. Once one brother was cast, casting an actor with an actual family connection to him seemed fitting for portraying the other. Their relationship reads as one of ordinary brotherhood, complicated by deep affection and a dark shared history. A threatening line calls one a plague sent to destroy, paired with a demand to be given a bride in marriage and a promise to restore a house to proper glory. Targaryen society, as first encountered in the story, forms a civilization built through conquest, though that conquest lies just outside living memory. A toast honors the original conqueror. 60 years of peace bred complacency, making this a decadent and prosperous period that predates the destruction and hardship shown in the original series. The Targaryens count as a fascinating, ultimately lost dynasty, recalling an era when dozens of family members ruled over Westeros together. Family dynamics run unconventional, marked by frequent incestuous marriage between siblings and cousins, intended to preserve a bloodline believed necessary for controlling dragons, a dangerous and difficult bond to form. This insistence on marrying within the family ties to an air of exclusivity and self-isolation, a central theme of the story, and a practice ultimately self-destructive over time. A tense exchange confronts one relative and tells them that restoration as heir would require a killing, met with a challenge to proceed. A dragon forms the very core of any Targaryen, underscored by a roar. The connection between dragon and rider defies easy description, with warnings against engaging dragons without an existing or potential bond, since that bond stays sacrosanct. New Targaryen offspring receive a dragon egg at birth, which, if it hatches, forms a lifelong pairing. A scene follows in which an egg is chosen for a newborn, praised as the perfect choice, alongside a boast about the superiority of one particular dragon, named for its grumpy, lithe, and aggressive temperament, and likened to a difficult relative. This period in the story's history features more dragons than at any point since Old Valyria, when roughly 1,000 were alive, compared to around 17 at this story's peak. A push for each dragon to read as visually recognizable as an individual character stands out, alongside criticism of dragons in other productions depicted with small wings on oversized bodies that would be aerodynamically implausible. Proper dragon design calls for large wings and a slender, serpentine body with a long tail and neck, closer to pterodactyls or dinosaurs than to typical depictions. Dragons overall combine gods, heavy bombers, and nuclear weapons, extremely powerful and essential to the family's standing. Part of the visual evolution of the franchise involved imagining what King's Landing looked like 2 centuries earlier. The Red Keep, a large composite set containing many individual locations, forms the centerpiece of production, hosting the bulk of the action for the season. Walking onto the stage for the first time felt overwhelming, with the set reading as enormous and labyrinthine, prompting astonishment at just how large Big turned out to be. It ranks as the most impressive set ever encountered purely for its scale. Unlike typical sets built from lighting rigs and plywood, this one stands indistinguishable from a real medieval castle until lighting rigs became visible overhead. Staircases on this set actually lead somewhere, including full bedrooms, rather than simply warning against going further. This reflects a level of construction beyond typical modern filmmaking shortcuts, with everything built rather than faked. No comparable set had been worked on before. The throne room stands out as especially significant. The most recognizable set carried over from the original series and required to feel like the same space, its realization marking an emotional milestone. The original throne earns iconic status, with the new version made larger, less symmetrical, and more dangerous, featuring swords emerging from the ground, tied to a rendering of the throne as forged from the weapons of the conquered and symbolic of dynastic power. Around 2,000 real swords, along with skilled model makers, went into building the structure gradually, starting with plastic swords before real ones were added, an enjoyable process to observe. Practical challenges arose in filming close-ups, given the hundreds of swords pointed toward the camera, requiring removable set pieces to allow the camera in without sacrificing visual impact. Walking into the finished throne room for the first time prompted an urge to climb up and sit upon it immediately. The idea of carving kings into the original columns, with their bases depicting past conquests, adds narrative weight and symbolizes the historical burden carried by the current king seated upon the throne. Construction extended to an inner courtyard, corridors, royal apartments, and a model of old Valyria that gradually grows to overtake an entire apartment, with an overall aesthetic leaning toward masculinity. A brief exchange wishes a princess and a guard goodnight. In another apartment, secret panels behind a bed conceal a passage used for a covert excursion into King's Landing, alongside a deliberate nod to a similarly themed apartment from the original series. A grand staircase intentionally symbolizes power, functioning as both a family home and a kind of parliament. A natural inclination toward personal creative flourishes gets acknowledged, occasionally reined in to preserve recognizability of the Red Keep courtyard, resulting in a compromise using the same architectural style and columns with slightly adjusted proportions. A brief exchange plays out in which a knight accepts a chosen role. One stage functions as the only true swing stage on the production, repeatedly built, shot, and dismantled for different sets, unlike the other permanent stages, having hosted builds including an altar room and a dragon skull previously seen in the original series, rebuilt anew for this production. Extensive sketching of dragons eventually shaped that skull's design, with its completion at full scale bringing deep satisfaction. Compared to the lesser reverence shown to dragons during the original series timeline, this version called for a cathedral-like setting, featuring a domed ceiling and an altar rather than a dirt floor. Candles form a major element of the set, with one location reportedly featuring around 1,000 of them, deliberately aged through weeks of melting to appear long-established, complicated further by the flammability of the dragon's skull itself, which required added safety measures. A studio of this scale provides the support systems necessary to service such a large production. The studio facility ranks among the best in England, offering exceptional scope and resources, an incredible facility with state-of-the-art stages. A greeting welcomes a visitor to a location associated with dragons. Large-scale LED volume technology brought an entirely new and prototypical addition comprising over 2,000 screens forming a fully enclosed space capable of 360-degree projection of any landscape. This setup created remarkable new opportunities, including the ability to shoot a sunset continuously for 10 hours. Dragon roaring follows. A tournament ground, additional sections of the Red Keep, and connecting tunnels were also constructed. A newly purchased plot of land became a dedicated backlot for the production, allowing ongoing development over multiple years. Determining the right balance for the show's world involved deciding that a certain number of filming locations needed to remain genuinely real rather than built or virtual. Spain, one of the earliest overseas filming locations for the original series, earns honor for that legacy, chosen in part to visually tie back to it while offering an exotic quality unavailable within England alone. A particular castle reads as remarkable, resembling something straight out of the franchise. a fantastical yet real place used to represent a foreign city. A specific site in Portugal registers as mind-blowing upon first sight, prompting a producer's comment that everything would need to be transported by helicopter, met with ready agreement. A first visit to the same location stands as a once-in-a-lifetime sight that would never have been experienced outside of work on the production, immediately followed by uncertainty over how filming could even be accomplished there. The undertaking amounts to a major collaborative effort to support a production of this scale in a country without prior experience hosting one, and marks a significant event for the country's film industry and its local crew. Portugal emerges as a new filming destination not just for the franchise, but largely for mainstream productions in general. A recurring pattern surfaces in which producers, questioning the necessity of a difficult location by listing all its complications, only reinforce the conviction that it was exactly the right choice. A decision was made early to use a landmark in Cornwall as the primary location for a coastal castle belonging to a wealthy seafaring lord. Recognized as a national treasure, the site required careful, considerate work, including boat access, safety concerns for cast and crew, and reliance on tidal windows limiting access to once or twice daily, with the path submerged the rest of the time. This location suits a natural fit for the seat of a maritime house, prompting approval that its owner would indeed have built such a place. That lord emerges as the greatest naval adventurer of his time and the wealthiest man in the realm aside from the throne itself, though not satisfied by wealth alone and driven instead by ambitions of a family bloodline upon the throne. A respectful greeting accompanies praise for the grandeur of the halls. This location stands as the very first setup filmed, carrying pressure to establish the visual standard for the rest of the production. A desire for a grand curved semi-spiral entrance staircase shapes the design, alongside a large mural depicting the Lord's seafaring life. Research into that character's history and voyages directly informed the artifacts created for the set. Another hall serves as a personal museum built from a lifetime of travel and collected objects filled with extraordinary items intended for close-up display on camera and praised simply as beautiful. A degree of apprehension accompanies handing over a long-running creation to new caretakers, compared to placing a child up for adoption, tempered by continued personal involvement and excitement about the collaboration. The pairing of a writer and a director works by complementary design, with one's work ending where the other's begins, neither writing nor directing the other's craft, but achieving storytelling alchemy together. One brings exceptional skill with language and deep understanding of the fictional world, while the other brings extensive directing experience and a drive to push collaborators toward their best work. Combined with a third key creative voice, the pairing balances grand scope and vision against a return to smaller-scale dynastic politics and dramatic intensity. Their personal kindness shapes the culture of the wider production, with both figures constantly present in influence yet rarely visible directly, holding vast knowledge of the show and its world. Deep affection binds the pair, credited with early encouragement and belief in one's ability to succeed. The people involved ultimately decide whether a production succeeds. Applause follows. A sense of being genuinely fortunate accompanies a shift in mindset that comes from knowing one is contributing to something far larger than oneself. A closing note voices gladness at being part of the collaboration and hope that audiences at home will enjoy the finished production, a grand, epic tale drawn from the history of Westeros, with a final warning to brace for a long journey ahead. Rhaenyra Targaryen, heir to the Iron Throne. No pan shared with an actor has felt quite like this one. Even when unobserved, that work still builds something between actors. Rhaenyra sits at odds with the gender assigned at birth, growing up as the decentered child. Being female means no power is expected. What stands out is the centering of a patriarchal culture and what opposition to that culture means for a female character. Rhaenyra registers as bold and self-assured, initially powerful through evident difference, a difference well recognized. The character's appeal rests in being rooted in the domestic and the familial. Despite being a giant show, the story stays grounded. The subjects explored map onto commonalities found in most people's lives: love and death, jealousy and aspiration, reflected in a beautifully written script. A claim surfaces of having only ever offered defense. A response follows, pointing out that despite 10 years on the throne, no invitation to serve as hand has ever been extended. A question comes back, asking why such an offer would be made. The reply cites brotherhood as reason enough. Introduction goes to the role of Prince Daemon Targaryen. He plays the true prince of the realm, yet very much an outsider, treading on the outskirts of everything and everyone. Much of King's Landing strikes the small folk as lawless and terrifying, with the character all swords and knives, in essence. A note marks his role as dragon rider, with a dragon named Caraxes. A great affiliation, love, and admiration for a brother who serves as king also comes through. A deep, dark history surrounds the pair. He claims to have only ever spoken the truth, with the observation added that the blood of the dragon runs thick. He plays a reluctant figure, drawn to chaos and well-suited to surviving within it. No apparent desire to rule any land emerges. Instead, a persistent pretense aims to provoke anger in others. House of the Dragon unfolds as a story of war, love, rebellion, and deceit, often feeling at times like a great tragedy constantly waiting to worsen. The fine knights gathered in the lists rank as a group without equal, and a wish calls for the luck of the Seven to shine upon all combatants. Viserys starts out as a young man, newly crowned king after Jaehaerys, a peacetime ruler. Honoring that legacy feels like a duty, though ruling proves a struggle, since pleasing everyone amounts to an impossible task, while conflicts must be managed to preserve peace. An awareness exists of how dangerous it is to sit on the Iron Throne, as occupying that seat makes one a target for constant conspiracy. This awareness passes on to Rhaenyra, Viserys' daughter, who is protected closely due to her recognized potential to become a great ruler. The notion that dragons can be controlled amounts to an illusion. The Targaryen dynasty's power stays inseparable from possession of dragons, and the fear those creatures inspire stems directly from that power. Beyond simply governing and keeping the kingdoms at peace, the underlying motivation lies in ensuring that the Targaryens remain on the throne. The overall experience amounts to a great journey shared with everybody involved, marked by great, supportive personalities. When all these elements come together, the show reaches something absolutely amazing. Such matters require discussion with the small council, and confirmation follows that this is already underway. Advice comes next on how to proceed. Background covers an old, wealthy, and powerful household that has stood at the center of politics for hundreds of years. Concern arises that losing control of certain shipping lanes would impoverish the ports. An acknowledgement follows that the report has been received and will be taken under advisement. Explanation continues that this figure serves as King's hand, standing close to the king as a trusted advisor with an unmatched awareness of events across the kingdom. A vast network of spies supplies this knowledge, likened in modern terms to a room lined with a wall of televisions. Distress sounds out, followed by a word of comfort and endearment in response. Further reflection casts this figure as a father, one constantly caught between official duties and a private, grieving interior. A question arises about why such self-destruction continues, alongside commentary on the ambiguity around motivations and intentions, and acknowledgement that the position runs difficult. Address comes with formal respect, raising a matter considered urgent despite reluctance to discuss it at such a dark hour: the question of succession. Reflection turns to the scale of the production, a sprawling metropolis that has, by necessity, given rise to a small, supportive, and enjoyable community. Showing up each day brings a source of joy, with frequent, hearty laughter remembered as something never regarded as a bad thing. Syrax grows quickly, expected soon to be as large as Caraxes, and almost large enough to be saddled by two riders at once. A preference for remaining a spectator rather than riding comes through. Alicent and Rhaenyra count as best friends, the only two people who can truly understand each other because of their similar backgrounds. Those backgrounds leave them isolated, causing deep reliance on one another, with the friendship at its peak. Alicent registers as very timid, a sensitive soul carrying an anger that remains pent up. A question arises about why self-destruction continues, met with only a hesitant sound in response. Alicent stands as a product of the patriarchy, growing more acutely aware throughout the story of where her place is held in the world. Alicent and Rhaenyra present as polar opposites upon first meeting, yet as the story continues, they prove more alike than expected, having been raised together almost like sisters. Rhaenyra reads as strong-minded and smart, though underestimated and perceived as bratty, seen as someone asking for too much. A remark points out that lying in that bed will soon be unavoidable, with the discomfort framed as a form of service to the realm. A preference surfaces instead for serving as a knight riding to battle and glory. The feelings and emotions of puberty come through, alongside the realization that fighting is not an option and that anger toward the world cannot simply be lashed out at. A way must instead be found to either solve the struggle or outsmart it, and this journey through internal and external battles gets followed closely. Joining House of the Dragon felt overwhelming at first, though ultimately loved and found to be exciting. A first take on Game of Thrones gets recalled fondly, exciting yet also terrifying in a good way compared to a roller coaster. For centuries, House Velaryon had to scratch out an existence from the sea. Upon ascending the Driftwood throne, what was wanted became clear, and it was seized. Corlys first joins Viserys' small council at a point when 4 ships have already been lost. His stern character grapples with questions about what should be done regarding the ships and the men. Corlys plays a man of action, with incredible ambition and little patience for fools. The Velaryons rank as one of the first families to settle in Westeros, controlling the greatest and strongest fleet. To elude a storm, sailing directly into it or going around it are the options, but waiting for its arrival is never advised. Known as the Sea Snake, Corlys ranks as the richest man and an accomplished sailor, a valuable ally. Corlys's wife, Rhaenys, also carries the name the Queen Who Never Was. The Prince Viserys Targaryen is announced. Ever since the name was read by the Great Council, an envious gaze from Corlys Velaryon lingers. The succession pits Viserys against Rhaenys. The throne, many felt, should have belonged to Rhaenys instead, a matter never quite forgotten. Rhaenys, the only child of Jaehaerys' eldest son, held a strong claim at the Great Council. Legacy and the possibility of returning to the line of succession to the throne keep Corlys awake at night. What has been most enjoyed about the show comes from getting to know all the people involved. Everybody registers as lovely. Being part of opening up the Westeros universe counts as something to be glad about. The title, Lord of the Tides, is announced. Overall, the experience amounts to an absolute joy. A declaration promises that a new order will be created upon becoming queen. The men of the realm already had an opportunity to appoint a ruling queen at the Great Council, and that opportunity met refusal. Princess Rhaenys had been denied that right. Princess Rhaenys held first place in line to the throne. Due to being a woman, however, the position was passed over in favor of a younger cousin, Viserys, who was made king instead. Prince Viserys Targaryen is proclaimed. As a result, she earns the title of the Queen Who Never Was. Though the crown should have been earned, it was never bestowed, leaving a very difficult position to occupy. A humble request asks for the favor associated with the title of the Queen Who Never Was. Being denied that role and left without a position marks an unfortunately familiar story for many women. Survival plays out as a game, as understood through Rhaenys' experience. Headstrong, intelligent, and intense qualities define the character, rooted in the notion that the core of any Targaryen is a dragon. Hope holds that fans will get everything previously experienced from Game of Thrones, and more, including more dragons. Men, it is asserted, would sooner put the realm to the torch than see a woman ascend to the Iron Throne. A question comes up about what is known of Sir Criston Cole, met only with an admission that nothing certain can be said. Criston Cole started as a low-born knight, serving as steward to the Lord of Blackhaven, before rising to a position of considerable power, though without the experience needed to wield it wisely. The situation reads as an opportunity to make something of oneself in a world where family name and connections determine advancement. Lacking any notable lineage or connections, all achievements rest on hard work and skill as a fighter. The first time the armor was worn stays vivid in memory, with remarks from others about appearing especially muscular, despite that not reflecting reality. Still, hearing such comments brought a sense of satisfaction. Wearing something so form-fitting and rigid encouraged a posture that proved genuinely useful. Having long admired the show's actors beforehand, being present among them counts as a stroke of good fortune. A reference to the production being Game of Thrones marks the kind of opportunity impossible to turn down. Recollection turns to the first day both of Mysaria's Episode 1 scenes were shot, a feeling of complete astonishment, as though suddenly being part of Game of Thrones itself. Sonoya Mizuno plays the role of Mysaria in House of the Dragon. Mysaria plays a fighter who knows how to survive, possessing incredible street smarts along with a kind of sixth sense and emotional intelligence that comes only from having lived a very difficult life. Playing a character with such depth counts as interesting and fun, especially given that the character continues to grow and change as a person. A declaration insists that service was not entered into out of desire for gold, power, or station, but rather in search of liberation. A special relationship with Daemon owes partly to an absence of fear toward him, as the two understand each other on a deep level. Something seductive marks being that close to power, tied to an ambitious quality within Mysaria. Anticipation builds that audiences will respond to the drama and its unexpected unfolding in a manner reminiscent of the original Game of Thrones series. A sense of creating something new comes through, elevating the material to another level with a depth that would not be expected. Overall, excitement surrounds being part of the project, alongside curiosity about how audiences will react.